This is good. Oh, you
Okay.
did it. Of our child. Oh, thank you. Um, Welcome to everyone who's part of our Child and Family Committee, and a big welcome to everybody who is not, but is just interested in this topic. If you do work with children and families on a regular basis and want to join us, that would be great as well. So you can email me, Barbara Ward Zimmerman, and we can add you on to our email list for the committee. But today we're very fortunate to have Raynette Riddick with us. Our speaker was recently changed from DCF, but back several months ago, there was some chat on our email listserv about mandated reporting. And this seemed to be a topic that a lot of folks were interested in having an update on. All of us, I'm sure, have been trained in this, both in graduate school and through other settings that we have worked in. But just to get a refresher, so when I spoke, that's what we plan to do today. When I spoke with Raynette, she was clear that there is lots of information to present. So depending on how this goes today, we may not have a lot of time to address questions, but please put your questions as they come up in the chat. And if there are some things that she can address today, that will be great. If she cannot address your question, and it really is an immediate kind of question, we can put you in touch with Raynette and you can be directed for an answer to a more emergency, immediate kind of question. Although if it's really an emergency, you'll know what to do. And if there's interest, Raynette is willing to join us again in 2 months so that we can have much more of a discussion, which we won't be able to really have today. So let's see how today goes. And if folks are interested, we'll work out a meeting at the end of June, June 24th, where Raynette can join us, and then we can have more of a question and answer kind of time. So don't hesitate to put questions in the chat. I will definitely monitor those and keep tabs on those. And maybe some we can address through the listserv after this. And if there's enough and we want to meet again in June, we can do that. So without further ado, I will introduce you to Raynette Riddick, who is the community provider for training through DCF. And I will let you do some introductions yourself, Raynette.
Thank you, Barbara. Can you all hear me? I have to put on my headset because, of course, my neighbor starts cutting their grass like as soon as I get
of course.
Right? But you
Yes.
guys can hear me. I have to put on my headset. Good?
Yes.
Wonderful. So again, thank you all for having me on today. I really appreciate the invitation to come and speak with you all. And I'm going to jump right into it because, as Barbara indicated, mandated reporter training is an entire training within itself about the duties of mandated reporters, how you go about making that report, and what happens during that time. So we want to get into that. I'm going to share my screen. Now we practice this, so this should work, right, Barbara? All right. Thumbs up if you guys can see it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So again, my name is Raynette Riddick, and I am a trainer at the Academy for Community Providers, which is an umbrella of our Academy for Workforce Development. It's actually a new arm of our training academy, or Academy for Workforce Development, where I provide trainings for providers. So that's my sole responsibility, and I'm loving doing that. And again, today I'm here to talk with you all about mandated reporter training. As Barbara indicated, we may not have time for a whole bunch of questions because I know that we're limited to an hour today, but I am happy to come back and have discussions, or again, if you all want to put things in the chat, by all means, please do so. I will say that a lot of questions are answered through this presentation. So if you can hold it until the end, it may answer some of your questions. If not, again, we'll make room for further information. All right, let's go. So DCF strategic goals, we partner with the community and families to really raise children who can thrive, right? We want them to be strong, we want them to be resistant, and we do that through 5 bold strategic goals. It begins with our workforce. Within our workforce, we really try to provide mutual support with all of our workers, ensuring that they are supported in the efforts of whatever it is that they need to do their job, right? So that's really key to us keeping our children safe. Our other goal and our foundational goal is, of course, safety, right? Keeping our young people safe, the most vulnerable populations, those who are not seen on in the public. You know, those are the infants and those who are not yet old enough for daycare. We want to keep our children, all of our children and youth, safe. The other piece is permanency, timely permanency, ensuring that when children are in our care, in DCF's care, that the permanency of that child is achieved in a timely fashion. So whether it's reunification or if it's being adopted, whatever that is, we want that to happen in a timely fashion. Another strategic goal is our racial disparate, racial justice, in a lot of different ways of DCF. When we're looking at the disproportionality of children of color who are highly represented, overrepresented, we look at it from the perspective of when children are entering care, when we're first introduced to a family, children who are part of the foster system, children who come in through investigations or family assessments, whatever area that is, that's how we examine the disparities. And we are very aware of those disparities, and we're looking for ways to eliminate that. And finally, the well-being of the family, of the children. We have enhanced assessments and interventions to, again, ensure that the proper services are being given to these families. So the purpose of mandated reporter training, why are we here today? So of course, I'm going to provide you with some information, but I also want to keep you up to date with what your roles and responsibilities are. I heard Barbara say, those who have taken mandated reporter trainings previously, depending on your organization and the way that the requirements are, there may be some things that you hear today that you haven't heard because maybe you haven't taken the course in a couple of years. I believe our mandate is every 3 years, but we do have some agencies that want you all to do it yearly. So it just depends on the makeup of your agency. But we want to keep you up to date with the roles and responsibilities, the changes in laws, because things like that, when laws change, it also changes the way that DCF has to respond to certain things. But it's also that we can protect not only the children, of course, but you as the mandated reporter, and keep you up to date with that. And I also want to hear your concerns and answer any questions that you all may have. And again, it may be limited, but we'll definitely get through that. So who must report? Everything that I talk about with you all today, these are Connecticut state laws. This is not, DCF, doing things alone. It's a state law, right? And so we identify professionals who, because of your regular contact with children, your regular everyday work with children, you are mandated by law to report suspected child abuse and neglect. This gives a list of those professionals who are mandated by law. And as you all can see, there's a litany. There's so many, including chiropractors, right? Who would have thought that chiropractor would be a mandated reporter? But family relations counselors, hygienists, foster parents, probation officers, and then there are others that will be identified: psychologists, police officers, of course, DCF workers, all because of their work with children makes them mandated reporters. There is an inclusion of some additional mandated reporters, and you will find again with updated laws and that provision that's made, it will occasionally add people on. So the most current list added victim supervisors for judicial department, as well as those who work in the court support services division. Recently, I want to say in 2020, they added DOC, right? So again, periodically we do additional mandated reporters are added, which makes that list longer as to who can be a mandated reporter or who is a mandated reporter. It was mentioned previously, the Public Act number 14186. This includes, and it was created to include any person who is a coach that's by permit by the Board of Education. They're coaching intramural or interscholastic athletics, 18 years of age or older, right? They become mandated reporters. So if they're employed as a coach or a director of youth athletics, of private youth sports or an organization, any paid administrator, faculty staff, athletic director, all of those folks in public or private institution of higher education, again, over the age of 18, and any paid youth camp director or assistant director. These are all mandated reporters, okay? So as we move forward, we want to keep in mind that the list is continually growing. And again, it's based on the work with children for all of these folks. So what must be reported? And this is an important piece, because we want you all to be aware of what it is that you're reporting, right? So mandated reporters are required to report or cause a report to be made when in the ordinary course of their employment. And I always have people underline that. In the ordinary course of their employment or profession, they have reasonable cause to suspect or believe that a child under the age of 18 is being abused or neglected. So we want you to report anything that is suspicious. You have a reasonable cause to suspect that there is neglect or abuse. We want you to report that. It doesn't matter if you know the identity of the alleged perpetrator or not. Any suspicion must be reported. So what's reported? Reasonable cause to suspect. What's observed, so what you actually see. Facts or statements by a child, victim, or third party, or allegations. Something that's very important. We do not need for you to be certain, right? We don't need for you to have all the proof, all the evidence. That's DCF's job, right? If you have a reasonable cause to suspect, based on, again, what you observed, what the child has told you or a third party has told you, or allegations, that is enough to call in a report. So let's talk about our definition. And again, our definition of abuse is a state law, right? So is defined a child who is under the age of 18 who has had physical injuries inflicted upon him or her other than by accidental means, has injuries which are at variance with the history given, meaning that what the child has said and what the injury is doesn't really make sense, or also is the condition which is the result of maltreatment, which includes sexual molestation or exploitation, deprivation of necessities, emotional maltreatment, or cruel punishment. That's our definition of abuse. And again, keep that in mind as we move forward with additional definitions. As a part of physical abuse, we also know that there are indicators of sexual abuse. So kids, and I know with you all working with children, you know that kids are not always going to have the language to say about being sexually abused, or even being able to maybe sometimes feel comfortable in saying it. So we give this as possible indicators of sexual abuse. One within itself does not mean necessarily that the child is being sexually abused. However, we want you all to understand that there may be some possible indicators of sexual abuse, and if it's something that you suspect, then by all means call that in. So physical, anytime a child, and again, this is children under the age of 18, anytime a child presents with any type of gastrointestinal complaints, or they have injuries or bruises to their private areas, if they have a sexually transmitted disease, if they're pregnant, those are all possible indicators of sexual abuse. And again, maybe one within itself is not, something that you'll say, oh, wait, but it will give pause to you, right? And that's something that we would want for you all to call in. A physician has to report if a child under the age of 12 or not more than the age of 12 has any type of venereal disease, because it is an indicator of sexual abuse. In the same way, there are some emotional indicators. And again, one within itself may not mean that a child is being sexually abused. However, it is important to note fire setting behaviors, cruelty to animals, sexually aggressive, manipulative of children, truancy, a child who is engaging in certain self-destructive behaviors, substance abuse, suicide attempts, cutting, prostitution, inability to eat, overeating. All of these things are possible indicators, including bedwetting, wearing an excessive amount of clothing, and promiscuity or avoidance of sexuality. Again, possible indicators of sexual abuse, and you can call that in. When we talk about sexual abuse, and again, I know this is going fast for you guys, but I'm hoping that you're getting what it is that I'm presenting. When we talk about sexual abuse, we have to talk about the consent for sexual activity, because we know kids are having sex younger and younger, right? And we get calls often about kids who are in relationships with kids their own age, and we understand that. And so we want to differentiate with what the age of consent for sexual activity is. And so that's important. So the general age of consent in Connecticut is 16. This is for most normal relationships. But when any of the following apply, then the age of consent becomes 18. So age of consent is 16 in normal relationships, but it becomes 18 when the following things are a part of it. So when the person is a guardian or responsible for the general supervision of others, the age of consent is 18. When a person is an athletic coach or an intensive ongoing instructor, a piano teacher, a mentor, a tutor, outside of a school setting, and the other is being coached, again, 18. And where one's person, professional, legal, occupational, or volunteer status gives a position of power, authority over someone else. And the older person is at least 20 years old. Again, age of consent is 18. Now, there are times that it does not matter what the age is, because it's irrelevant, as even consensual adult sexual activity, it's a crime under these conditions. So where one person is a school employee employed by the Board of Education and the other is a student, and where one is a coach, an intensive ongoing instructor, and the other is in a secondary high school setting. Now, I always give this example. You may not want to admit that you watch Lifetime. Some of y'all do. You ever seen the videos or the movies about teachers who, become involved with their students? That's what we're referring to here. When a person is a school employee, it doesn't matter. It's not consensual, and it's a crime, and that person will be arrested. Human trafficking is something that I've been with the department for 22 years. And I remember when we first began hearing about human trafficking, and where we would think that we had individuals, children who were, just running away and doing whatever. We later found out that they were victims of human trafficking. So the federal definition of human trafficking, and then there's a Trafficking Victims Protection Act that helps protect them. But it's the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for sex trafficking. And then we see the definition for that. It's a commercial sex act. A person is given money to receive, a child. And labor trafficking, labor of services through the use of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of, and again, we say that this is modern day slavery, right? That's what we call human trafficking, modern day slavery. And again, you're like, well, what does that have to do with me as a mandated reporter? Well, you may run into this situation where you suspect that a child is being human trafficked, and you can most certainly call that in. So I'm going to pause here. I see some chat. I'm not sure if that's something that, let me see. Whoa.
Well, one of the questions was about a situation that there had been confirmed abuse and
Yep.
confirmation that a report was made.
Mhm.
And then by a therapist one evening, and the next day, one of our members, Stephanie, was to see this child for an evaluation. And although she had received confirmation from the therapist, the mother disclosed that abuse had occurred, stated that the therapist had already reported it the night before.
Okay.
Our psychologist received confirmation from that therapist, both verbally and through seeing the 136 form,
Yes.
that therapist had already reported, but to be safe, our psychologist did re-report.
Okay.
Is that something that's required, or did she not need to do that?
So if a report has been made and it's been confirmed, unless there is additional information that's being added, you don't necessarily need to call that in because you've confirmed that it's already been called in. Do we have duplicate reports? Do people call in a report, more than one person? They do. However, if you already have confirmed that the report has been made and you have the confirmation both from the care line and from the other person, you do not need to call in an additional report. Only if there is additional information would you need to call in that report. Does that answer that? Who was that, Stephanie?
Yes, it was Stephanie.
Okay.
Does that answer?
It was me. Thank you. That's really
Okay.
helpful.
Does that answer that, Stephanie?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. You're welcome. And then Tom wanted to know, can we have access to? Yes, you may. Yes, I can do that, Tom. Do you want it right now? I can't do it this moment, but I can provide it in the chat afterwards.
That would be great. They're just going by so fast that it would be nice
I
to be able
know.
to
I'm sorry. I'm
have some
sorry.
time with them. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
I will
great.
send it to Barbara.
That's
And then,
perfect.
is that okay, Barbara?
Yep, and I will
Okay, perfect.
distribute. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Andy is saying I've had a very difficult time to getting through the care line to file a report, sometimes up to an hour and a half. Is there a better way to reach DCF? So Andy, that has been an ongoing issue and we know that. And it's something that we have been working on. There's been so many changes up at Careline. I will make notes of that and let them know, but it's been reported and it is unfortunate. There is not another way to make a report, but we are working on ensuring that people are getting through in a much quicker way. So we are aware of that. And again,
Is it possible to have it so that we could just file the report online without having to reach a human being? Because it's really not fair to make a provider wait an hour to 2 hours of time.
Sure.
When we could just basically file it online or mail it in.
So when it's a report, and further in a little while, we'll talk a little bit about this, but we do have a new system, a new portal for reporting online non-emergent reports. So a non-emergent report would be something that does not need an immediate response, meaning that we don't have to send someone out within, an emergency type basis within the next 2 hours or within 24 hours. It's a portal that, again, if you need to make a report and it's non-emergent, it's not an emergency, you can make that report online without calling in a report. So
How
you'll
do you,
see that information shortly.
oh, we'll see that. Okay, great.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So let's move into, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Somebody else?
Renette.
No, it's
I know
okay,
you have a
Renette.
lot to go through, but I put this in the chat. Can providers use, there's a hospital phone line that I use to make reports. Is that something that everybody can use?
I don't believe that that's provided to I think the hospital one is based on the hospital emergency. I'm not sure whether or not they have made that open to other providers, like just like with the police at one point, there was a separate kind of like a backdoor type thing. I'm not 100% sure who they give permission to besides the police and besides the hospitals. If you're saying that you got through, I don't know if it was through the hospital, if that's how it was done, then yeah, I would say, hey, if you have that number, go for it. But otherwise, I don't know if they just make that available to doctors in general. You understand what I mean? But if you have that number and they took a report, listen, go for it. Okay? All right. All right. So when we talk about abuse, we also have to talk about neglect, right? Because all cases are not the physical type of cases where you can see a bruise or, that something has happened to a child to cause him or her harm. So we also have to talk about neglect. I like to say at this point that poverty is not neglect, right? So we get a lot of calls about, kids maybe not having the proper clothing or shoes or whatever. It's not saying that that family does not need help, but it also doesn't mean that they're neglectful. So here's our definition. Again, this is a Connecticut state statute. Neglect, again, a child under the age of 18 who has been abandoned or is being denied proper care or attention, physically, educationally, emotionally, or morally, and is being permitted to live under those associations that are injurious to his or her well-being. We do have educational neglect. We have many cases of educational neglect, right? Educational neglect is sometimes very difficult to, on its face, it looks like it's educational, but when we get involved, we see that there are other things. So on its face, educational neglect occurs when a child 5 years of age and older, under the age of 18, and I'm emphasizing that under the age of 18, because sometimes we'll get calls for kids over the age of 18, and that's not, we deal with children 18 and under. But 5 years of age and older, under the age of 18, who have had excessive absences from school through the intent or neglect of the parent or caregiver. So again, when there are a number of absences, they can be based on anything. It could be something physical going on, something emotional, even a medical need. So there may be other underlying things, but it starts off as educational because the children are missing school. There are some exceptions and special considerations when we're looking at educational neglect. So these are some exceptions that it's not considered neglect. So when a child age 5 or 6 is not required to attend school, a parent does not have to enroll the child at 5 or 6, but it's only neglect if the child is enrolled and then does not attend school. So the parent enrolls the child, but then doesn't, the kid is attending school and not receiving home instruction. That's when it's considered educational neglect, but in this case, it is not. For children older than 12, excessive absences through the child's intent. In other words, a parent trying to get the child to go to school, getting the child up every morning, literally driving the child to school, but the child leaves. Despite the parents or caregivers' efforts, the absences are due to the child's truancy, and truancy is handled through the school district. And then the last one is a parent or person who has control of a child 17 years of age. They may consent to the child being withdrawn from school. So if a parent decides to withdraw the child from school, that again is another exception of it being educational neglect. Okay. All right. Educational neglect, medical neglect. So medical neglect is the refusal of a parent who is responsible for the care of that child to obtain services or necessary medical, dental, or mental health care for a child, or withholding medically indicated treatment from disabled infants with life-threatening conditions. So a child has diabetes and the parent does not want or will not give the child insulin. That is medical neglect, right? And those are times, of course, that we will investigate that. We note, though, that a failure to provide the child with immunizations, routine well childcare within itself, it does not institute or constitute rather medical neglect. Will we still investigate? Yes. If it meets that threshold for us to investigate, we will. However, we have to keep those things in mind that a parent has a right to not want their children immunized. It hasn't necessarily come up, of course, with the vaccine for COVID yet or anything like that. It may, I'm not sure, but in terms of other immunizations, if a parent does not want to give a child or have that child immunized, it doesn't necessarily constitute neglect, but it also means that it doesn't mean that we're not going to investigate that. So we just like to be clear on the medical neglect portion of that. We get many, many questions and many calls in regards to children being left alone. There is no state law for a child or state age for a child being left home alone. Now, DCF, we recommend that a child be at least 12 years old. However, you as a parent, you have to use your discretion. If you have a child that is mature, able to contact 911, those are things you have to consider, right? But there is a law about a child being left alone in a motor vehicle in the public. So leaving a child unsupervised in the place of public accommodation or motor vehicle. Again, any parent, guardian, or person having custody or control, knowingly leaving a child unsupervised, ages 12 and under, in a vehicle for a period of time that presents a substantial risk to the child's health or safety shall be guilty of a Class A misdemeanor. And we've seen it far too many times. We've seen kids, I don't know what it is about Walmart and Target. They go into the store and they leave the kid in the car. Those are times that we are called and arrests are made because it is against the law. Who does DCF investigate? A person responsible for a child's health care, a child's health, welfare, or care, and a person given access. So we'll break that down. A person responsible is a parent, a guardian, a foster parent, the staff personnel at a child daycare. That's why we do investigations for daycare centers and things like that, because these are people responsible for the care of children. Staff employees of residential child care settings. And again, anyone who has that authority and ability to care for a child and something happens while that child is in the care of a person responsible, then we will investigate that person. It's the same for a person who is entrusted. So anyone given access to a child by a person who is responsible for the health, welfare, and care of a child for the purpose, again, of providing education, childcare, counseling, spiritual guidance, coaching, training, all of those things. A person entrusted is someone who can also be investigated. Okay, so person responsible and a person entrusted. So let's talk about our reporting procedure. This is how you make the report. And as I was saying to, I forget if it was Tom or Andy, this is a new, we literally just rolled it out. I want to say 2 weeks ago, maybe. So the Department of Children and Families have developed an online portal for mandated reporters. It's available for non-emergent reports of abuse and neglect. And I'm going to read this word for word because I want to ensure everyone gets this. Non-emergent reports are reports where children is not in immediate harm, in need for urgent or emergent medical or mental health needs, not expressing fear of further abuse or neglect within the next 24 hours, and there's no concern of a child being inaccessible within the next 24 hours. We're very specific with that because this is for non-emergent reports. For emergent reports where it requires urgent response, you still need to call DCF Care Line. You still have to submit, do the oral report as well as the 136. So again, emphasizing that this is for non-emergent reports. When, as soon as practical, no later than 12 hours after making, this is for emergent reports now. After making that, just want to make sure I didn't skip that. Okay. For making the emergent report, you must do it within 12 hours of becoming aware. And this is how you make that call. Call the care line. A written 136 is needed. You have to provide that 136. We won't accept the 136 without the oral report being made. We have had people to make a written report, but then they don't call it in. And then they call DCF and say, hey, I sent in a report, but I never got a response. That's because you didn't do the oral. You have to make both for emergent reports. You have to do that. And then we note that a mandated reporter should never complete your own investigation prior to making a report. We want you to get as much information as you have without forcing the issue and getting more, right? That means don't do your own investigation. That is something that DCF will take care of. Non-emergent reports. These again are reports that do not need an immediate response. All non-emergent reports should be submitted through the mandated reporter portal. And again, this is a clickable link that brings you right to the dashboard. We're going to provide the training information and user guides, right? And I went through the training and all of that last week, and it actually gives you step by step. So you're not going to be left with, what am I supposed to do? I need to call somebody. Everything is available within that portal. You're going to be asked specific questions that's going to help guide your submission, because if there are certain things that pop up in that portal that says to in the portal that, nope, this is not a non-emergent, this is something that needs to be called in. It's going to tell you that. So you don't have to be concerned with whether or not, you know, am I making mistakes? Should this be, is this an emergent report? Should I call in? Depending on your answers, you'll know whether or not you need to call in a report as opposed to making that online portal. You do not need to submit a 136 form when you make this report on the portal. So you don't need to do the 132, right? I mean, 136, sorry. And after you submit this online portal report, you will get an email confirming, you're going to get an email confirming that the report has been made. All right. So that will be your proof that your report went through, because you'll be asked for your email. And upon submission of that report, you will get an email. Okay. All CAPTA, and that's the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment. All of those in all birth and hospital CPS reports, there's a different portal for that. And those of you who do that, you should still do it through that portal. And again, no later than 12 hours after making that report. Any questions on that? Because I know that that's a lot. Okay.
I'm sorry, can you put the hyperlink in the chat?
I think I can. Let me see.
Yeah, we can't take it off your.
Let me see if I can
PowerPoint.
copy it. Oh no, it's not letting me copy. It's not letting me copy it for some reason, but I am going to send this to Barbara, so she'll make sure you all get this. Okay.
Can
It
you,
won't let me copy. For
But
oh, wait.
but what I did is I made a copy with my phone of the screenshot. So I have a copy on my phone of what it is, and then I just printed it out.
Perfect. I'm just trying. It won't let me. Yeah, it won't let me copy and paste. But yep, we'll get that to you guys. Okay. Thank you, though.
that sounds good. Can you just give like an example or two of what you would say constitutes a non-emergent report, like something
Sure.
that would make sense to categorize it as non-emergent?
So I would say, and I'm actually going back to some of the training that we just had, some of the examples. It's not, and I don't want anybody to get me wrong when I say that. It's not to say that substance abuse is not something major, right? But if a parent is suspected of substance use, right, and the child comes into school and says, oh, my mom or dad, they were using drugs or whatever. If you, of course, you suspect that, and because the child came to you and said that, but it's not an emergency. It's not something where the child is in danger. He suspects, or he said, hey, I saw my mom, doing drugs. That may be an example of a non-emergent, because is it risk? Of course, it's a risk, but it's not an emergency where this child is being harmed. It's a risk. It's a concern. I think the other example may be educational. That's for me the easiest one. I think if it's of an educational nature, and you have concerns, that's when this portal would also be used. But again, when I tell you, when you go into this portal and you begin to fill out certain, it'll ask you questions, it'll give you opportunity to write out what the issues and concerns are. When you get to the end of each section, it's going to say whether or not this is emergent or non-emergent. It literally tells you that, depending on the information that you gave. So if you put in the information that a child came in with a bruise, say he had a black eye, and the child was afraid to go home, that wouldn't be something that would be accepted as a non-emergent situation. It would be an emergent, and that portal is going to tell you, stop, calling a report. So it depends on the information that you.
That's helpful. And just one of our members, Carissa, was saying she just used the link, and it says it's the DCF background check portal. Is the portal?
Okay. So
maybe
there
not
should
it.
be 2 portals. If it's not, thank you for letting me know that. Thank you. And I will let our folks know what that is doing. But it does take you to the background check page, but there's supposed to be a second portal next to it. All right, I'm writing that down. Thank you so much. Portal is going to background check. Thank you for that. All right, we have a few minutes. The oral and portal report shall contain the following information if known. And again, we're not asking you all to do an investigation. I know it kind of sounds hypocritical because we're saying, give us all the information, but don't give us more than what you know. This is what's known though, right? 9 times out of 10, you know the name and address of the child and the parents, the age, the gender, what the injuries are, maybe the time and date it occurred, if there's been any previous injuries, things like that. Tell us everything that you know, right? Any information concerning prior cases, that's always kind of a huge thing. If you have a family that, hey, I had Johnny last year and this happened last year to this family, it's okay to tell us that. And once we get into the case, we'll see if it was a family that's known to DCF anyway. And then we want you to tell us of any action that was taken to treat the injury or provide shelter. This is a 136 form. This is only needed for oral reports. The portal, again, you do not have to provide this information. And we do ask for the child's name, the race of the child, the reporter's name, and the race of the reporter. The reason why we ask for that is, again, disproportionality. We ask for this information because at every level of DCF, we want to ensure that we are addressing these disparate outcomes. So this is why we do ask. Can you not give your race? Yes, you can decline. You can say no, right? But we will ask you. I just wanted you all to be prepared for that portion. Again, that's our contact information. We'll notify the police, DCF, when a child has died, has been sexually assaulted, has suffered a serious impairment, brain damage, been sexually exploited, and suffered serious non-accidental physical injuries. DCF will notify the police and work with the police. You can request to be an anonymous mandated reporter, right? When you call in the report, you can say, I am a mandated reporter. However, I wish to remain anonymous to the family. That's something that you should do. If you want to remain anonymous, do that at the top of your call. All right. It will be kept confidential, but it will be disclosed to DCF, to law enforcement, to state's attorney. And sometimes when, as a case goes on, if it gets to the trial period and the case goes to trial, then it needs to be disclosed. But if you wish to remain anonymous up to that point, you can most certainly ask for that. There are legal protections for reporting, but there are also consequences for failing to report. Immunity is if you make a report and you understand and know that you're making the report and you feel that something has happened, you're making that report in good faith. We call it good faith, right? You're immune to any type of liability, civil or criminal. We're not going to come and say this really didn't happen because you'll be immune from all of that. False reporting is when a person makes a false report, and from that report, the consequences is that you'll be fined or imprisoned, right? People make false reports, they absolutely do. Failing to report and or delayed reporting. We get a lot of questions about this because it's important to make a report in a timely fashion. You have to do it within the required time period. And again, we say within 12 hours. And if it's a violation, if it's a subsequent violation by the willful or intentional, if you just don't do it, like you just don't make the report, you know that something has happened to a child, but you failed to make a report, then a person, you can be found guilty of failure to report. You'll have to participate in educational training programs, and DCF is required to notify the chief state attorney if people have failed to make a report in the required time. So it is important to make those reports in a timely fashion. We are, because it's not just about, I'll make the report whenever. It really could mean the difference between a child getting the help that they need. So it is important to make that report in a timely fashion. Again, any person who intentionally or unreasonably interferes or prevents the making of a report shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. As an employee, you are protected. You make a report and maybe your employer doesn't agree with it, but the employer can't discriminate against you, can't fire you for anyone who's making a report in good faith. They can't hinder you. They can't prevent you from making a report. And any employer who violates that, they will be brought into action in Superior Court and fined. And it's really a thing of you as an employee, you are protected. When you do it in good faith, you make a report in good faith, your employer cannot discriminate or retaliate against you. You are protected by law. All right, we're coming near the end. There's a couple of things that, what if you feel unsure if something is a real case? It's best to call it in and let DCF decide, right? Absolutely. So I tell everyone that DCF is we're the professionals, right? We can't do our job without you all as mandated reporters, because if you're seeing these children, then you're the one, you're having that firsthand information. You're professionals. We trust that you're doing this in the best interest of children. We don't expect for you to complete an entire investigation. So what we're saying is, yes, you can absolutely call in. That's right. So even if you're unsure, let DCF be the deciding factor. You don't have to, when in doubt, call. Because if you have a reasonable cause to suspect child abuse and neglect, and then it maybe it isn't, okay, but you're doing that in good faith. You're not being, you're not trying to be a person who is trying to stir up trouble, or you're trying to do it in a malicious way. No, if you have reasonable cause to feel that something's going on, call it in and let DCF be the one to say it's not abuse or neglect and we're not investigating, right? So we have two tracks, right? Differential response system is what we call it. After you call the care line, this is what happens when you call the care line with the report. You call the care line. We have a process which we determine whether or not we're going to open a case. And once we determine that that case needs to be open, then it goes to one or other. It goes to a family assessment track or investigation. Now, I'm going to tell you, as an investigation supervisor, before I went to the Workforce Academy, it does not matter if it's a family assessment or investigation. My workers treat cases the same. We view cases the same. We know in investigations it's higher risk, so it may be coming in hot, right? It may be something that is of an immediate concern, and it's higher risk, and because of that, it's something of an emergent nature. We need to get out there. So in investigations, we do have those cases. But when I view a case, I view it as this family, regardless of if it's the fault of the parent or not, this family needs help. And that's how we view cases, and we treat families the same in terms of that. We give them that same attention. But in an investigation, we have 3 response times. Same day, we have 2 hours to respond to that investigation. So that means that our investigators are going to get out to wherever the child is, and we're going to respond immediately. 24-hour is, again, 24 hours to respond. But I'll tell you again, as a supervisor, if it's coming in as a 24, I still treat that as an emergency. I send my workers out. But by law, we have 24 hours to respond, and then 72 hours response time. So we have to respond within 3 days. Mandated collateral contacts, meaning they're going to get in touch with you as the mandated reporter. They're going to also do other collateral contacts, educational, medical, all of those things to ensure that the child is safe, getting updates from folks like that. We assess protective factors, the parent's ability to care or take care of the child. We have an abuse or neglect finding, meaning, are we going to say that abuse or neglect occurred? We make the determination whether or not a central registry is going to be. A central registry is not like your bridal registry or a baby shower registry. You don't want to be on a central registry. That means that you are at risk of harming a child. And if your name goes on that, that means that you can't work with children. There's certain things that you can't do, but we make that determination. 45-day completion. It takes us 45 days to complete an investigation. Sometimes it takes a little less, sometimes it takes a little more. But this is our focus. Our focus, are we going to substantiate? Are we going to unsubstantiate? Are we going to transfer for ongoing services? All of this is done through our risk assessment. For our family assessment cases, again, lower risk cases, we still respond, we still do all the same things as an investigation. But at the end of the 45 days, we say, does this family just need support? If they need support, then let's refer them to our community partner agency, where DCF is gone out of the picture, meaning our worker isn't going to the home, but we have a community service agency in place providing services. Our main focus, again, service recommended, services not needed, and again, transfer for continued services. It can switch between tracks, meaning that a family assessment can become an investigation if there are some risk factors, if there are some safety factors that emerge during the investigation, but an investigation cannot turn into a family assessment. It's all based on the risk assessment that is done. We have two tracks to be more flexible in our response to child abuse and neglect, to better understand those issues of maltreatment, to engage families. We are really focusing on family and trying to ensure that we're inclusive of family. And we want to increase that share of responsibility with families and communities. Disparate outcomes result from over and unconscious decisions. I talked to you earlier about us lowering the rate of disproportionality. And again, our first decision-making point, reasonable suspicion. Am I calling in this report because is it based on the race of the family? Or I'm not calling in the report based on the race of the family. I know I'm rushing, so I'm sorry if it's being, I don't mean to talk so fast, but I just want to make sure that you all are getting this. This again is our disproportionate disparity in CPS. And this is statewide statistics based on our total childcare population. And again, when you get this PowerPoint, you can look through that again. Safe Haven Act, we talk about this as an alternative way of leaving infants in an unsafe place. A parent may voluntarily surrender physical custody of an infant aged 30 days or younger to the nurse and staff of a hospital, and the parent is not required to provide his or her name, medical history. And the last thing is our protection of infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. We know that this is our invisible population. We are really big on safe sleep. It's something that we talk with a lot with parents. We educate parents about safe sleep environment to ensure that, this is a preventable cause of death. And we talk with parents all the time in regards to that. I did it, Barbara.
Wow, excellent. There was just one more. I know we have to hop off, but there was one more question in the chat that we haven't responded to from Melanie. Can you speak to minor on minor sexual exposure, touching, quote unquote, play? I'm assuming since minors are under 18, there is no official perpetrator, but is there a reason to call DCF in consideration of possible lack of supervision?
Absolutely. So again, that's one of those cases where, it can be lack of supervision. It could be, and again, not putting it out there, but kids, I know kids touch and they have that natural curiosity at a certain age. But then if it becomes something more than that, you have to wonder, did something happen to this kid? Is somebody touching this kid? And unfortunately, in my DCF mind, that's kind of where I kind of go sometimes when it's beyond a natural curiosity, when they're using implements or they're doing other things. It kind of says, wait a minute, what else is going on? And absolutely, it can be a lack of supervision. And again, I'm going to say this ad nauseum. When in doubt, call DCF. If you just want to feel that, listen, I kind of suspect, I'm not really sure, call Caroline, run it past them. Let DCF be the deciding factor. Let DCF decide, because otherwise, it will haunt you. I've heard people say that. It haunts them when they're like, oh my God, should I make this call? Don't put that pressure on yourself. Please don't. Call it in, let DCF be that deciding factor, and we'll take care of what needs to be taken care of. As a mandated reporter, we're working with you guys. We can't do our job without you, right? And so it's important for us to work together. So I appreciate, I tell all the mandated reporters, I really appreciate the time that you take to do your job and to help us keep the children of Connecticut safe.
Well, thank you, Raynette, tremendously.
You're
I
welcome.
think you covered all the questions that were in the chat. We will send
Excellent.
out the slide deck to everybody.
Yes.
If more questions do come up, folks can contact me and we can decide if we just send them your way. If there's just one or
Yes.
two, if there's a bunch, we can think about getting together again. But we really
Absolutely.
appreciate you being with us, sharing all this information, sharing the slide deck and the new information as well.
You're
And I just
welcome.
want to thank everybody for joining us today. That was wonderful. Some new faces to our committee.